Well, good day, everyone. Today I am talking to Connie Harper. She is involved with the Riches Project, which is out of the History Department and also affiliated with the Center for Humanities and Digital Research here at UCF. And so I'm very happy to talk to her because she is really one of the kind of technical wizards behind the whole project. And so, Connie, would you like to tell me a bit about some of your technical background, and then we'll go into talk a little bit about Riches itself.
Okay. I've been a programmer since about 1992. I got a computer science degree here at UCF. I worked for a bank, writing programs for banks. I wrote programs for physicians, software that they use to send claims to insurance companies, all that stuff. But it was all database related software. So I mostly always worked with Microsoft SQL Server, a lot of SQL programming, a lot of database replication, database information about patient data and physician data. So that was my background before coming here in 2011.
2011, okay. Where did you do your computer science?
Here at
UCF, right? Okay. So, what drew you here? Like, what was interesting? Was it directly to the Riches Project, or was it the History Department in general, or?
Well, actually, I had stopped working for a few years because I had 2 children.
Okay.
And someone told me about the Veterans History Project.
Ah, got it.
And so they needed a program, a database program for the Veterans History Project, and they knew that I was a database programmer and said, oh, this is perfect for you because it's part-time, you know, you can get back into working without leaving the children. It's too much. And so I worked on the Veterans History Project first, and then later the full-time job came available. I applied for that.
Great, sounds good. So what I'm interested in today is to talk a little bit about some of the nuts and bolts of the Riches project. First, can you give us like a quick overview of what Riches is? I mean, it's a kind of an umbrella sort of thing for a number of different things, but can you bring us up to speed in general, and then we'll maybe get into some of the components of it.
Do you mean in general about Riches?
Yeah,
itself?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so Riches is a project where, well, any professor or group or organization can go off on their own and collect history about Central Florida. It could be oral histories, it could be podcasts, it could be just digitizing history in museums. And then and those projects fall under Riches, and then they can upload them into our database project, which is called the Riches Mosaic Interface.
Okay, great. So let's start with that interface. Okay, you say that people can do kind of digital history projects or museum projects or whatever and upload. So what do you mean by that? Like, what is that interface? How does that work?
The upload interface itself?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so we use Omeka in our as our back end,
which I'll get you to talk about in a few minutes.
Right. Into Omeka, there's several different ways to import data. We've customized a lot of our import processes. Okay. So we have, for example, you can create metadata into an Excel spreadsheet, save it as a comma delimited file, and we can import into Omeka. And you would have digitized, say, documents, like scanned documents. Or if it's an oral history, you can give a link to your history file on YouTube. You could, if it's a podcast, we can also do the link to the MP3 file. So that data gets imported into Omeka, and then you can see it on Omeka. Our user interface queries the Omeka database to display it on the Google Map interface.
Okay, so I mean, I guess one of the things about doing digital history is that you're dealing with a lot of different kinds of data, a lot of different kinds of documents. In other words, it's not all just text, which can be coded the same way. You mentioned podcasts, you mentioned, I mean, there's images, there's video, there's all sorts of different things. So you're able to query all of those sorts of things, all of those different things, and bring them into one user kind of experience. Is that right?
Right. So We have, our files are stored on the file system.
Okay.
We don't put the files in the database itself.
Mhm.
So our files are all in the file system, and what we've decided to do for the videos, since we don't have streaming software on our server,
Mhm.
we just use YouTube as a streaming
Got it.
server.
Right.
So, so pretty much videos, we usually use YouTube.
Mhm.
Um,
Why YouTube rather than, let's say, Vimeo or one of the other video services?
The only reason we chose YouTube is just the unlimited data and the
Okay.
availability of it.
Okay.
It's not, yeah, it's
Okay.
not like a super. Vimeo is more artistic. They usually
I see.
like artistic videos and well put together videos.
Polished, I see. Okay.
Ours are, documentaries created by students. So
Right. Got it. Okay. All right. So now you mentioned Omeka. Can you explain briefly what that is and how it integrates with the rest of what you're doing here?
okay. So Omeka is an open source software,
Mhm.
which is very nice for us because, like I said, we customized a lot of our
Mhm.
import. We import with a Harvest plugin,
Mhm.
with a CSV import. We customize that.
Mhm.
We import, how else? Oh yeah, the contribution plugin. Sorry.
Okay. Right, and so that's something that essentially can crowdsource data, right? I mean, somebody can
Yes.
just put in, somebody from wherever can
Yeah.
say, hey, I've got this document from my, handed down from my grandparents or whatever,
Mhm.
and it seems relevant to whatever you're doing. So they can upload an image of that or something like that.
Right.
And
So-
can they can comment on it? What can they what can they do along with
Right.
uploading it?
So what we've done is we've chosen to use the contribution plugin.
Okay.
Omeka, when they have their contribution plugin, they make it so that people can contribute anonymously,
Mhm.
but we don't do that. We
Mhm.
force a login.
Mm-hmm.
Because
And why would you do that?
Because in our database, we don't want it to be like a wiki that
Okay.
everybody can just put stuff into.
Okay.
Everything is verified and everything goes through a metadata editor.
So this actually deals with one of the kind of perennial problems with digital humanities, which is the question of authority or authorizing, or quality control, as it were, right?
Right.
I mean, Wikipedia solves that in one way, which is basically by making everything open, and so you can put anything up, but then it's going to get critiqued.
Mm-hmm.
You solve it in a different way, which is having a kind of a gatekeeper sort of
Yeah,
situation.
exactly. Because every project, like for example, if it's student work, the professor is going to verify it
Right.
before they submit it.
Right.
And if it's work on a grant, they've done their scholarly work,
Right.
and then they're going to upload. And then if it's local museums or local collections.
Mhm.
Then they will import it
Mhm.
with the contribution. They'll
Mhm.
submit it,
Mhm.
and then our metadata editor will verify it and ask questions and make sure we have copyright, information.
So
make
that's
sure that
important
we
too,
have,
yeah. Do you use? I mean, obviously, I guess you would be kind of in the world between traditional copyright and maybe something like Creative Commons sorts of rights management.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work? I mean, some of the things that would be uploaded, I'm sure, would have actual traditional copyrights on them, or you would need permissions of that sort,
Yeah.
whereas other things would have different kinds of permissions. How do you do that?
Well, we do a couple of different things. One of them is that the images we import, that we just not necessarily that we import, but what we display on our website is low DPI, like maybe
see.
72 DPI.
Okay.
So we kind of just that just in general discourages people from saying publishing. So
Got it. Okay.
we have our rights, our disclaimer that says that our information is to be used mainly for educational purposes.
Right.
But we also, when we deal with museums, some of them don't want their information to be downloaded, and we tell them that they can put a watermark on the image if they want to. And most people are okay with it as long as it's low quality image.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's another way of dealing with it. The higher the quality of the image, the more somebody might be tempted to use it for, let's say, an image in a book or something they're making money off of or something like that. And so that's interesting. It's kind of a technical there's a virtue to low res.
And some people don't mind at all. Like,
Uh-huh.
go ahead, use it, put
Right.
high quality. We want everybody to be
Right.
able to use it. And then,
Right.
so it really is up to the
Huh.
contributor.
That's interesting. Okay, so you're dealing with all this different kind of data. You're dealing with stuff that's both put in by people on staff here, students, as well as just people out in the wild. When they are uploading, when any of these people are uploading, how much extra information are they uploading? I mean, are you getting them to put in as much of the metadata as possible? Do they have to know anything about Dublin Core?
Right.
How much are they doing?
In our contribution plugin, we ask questions and we give examples of answers. So we don't actually tell them necessarily that they're doing Dublin Core. We ask questions like, please give a description, and then we'll give an example of, like, we tell them we want the who, what, when, where, why.
And can you mention what Dublin Core is? I mean, some people may not actually know what that is.
Okay, so Dublin Core is a standard for historical archive data.
Okay.
It's basically just certain fields, description, coverage, rights, contributor. I don't remember all of them, but
I think it's about 15 or so, isn't
there's
it?
15 fields.
So this is kind of a standardized way so that databases can, as it were, talk to each other in the same language or having the same kind of starting point.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons they chose Omeka was because it does the Dublin Core,
right.
And because we use Dublin Core, we can harvest data from any other repository that will export data in Dublin Core format.
And that's quite a few of them? I mean, that's pretty standard, is it?
Well, it is. Actually, the State of Florida Archives uses Omeka, so it's good. So we can actually harvest for them. And also the library here at UCF uses Content DM, but they go ahead and export in Dublin Core format. So Content DM doesn't use Dublin Core, but they
can export that way, yeah. So that's an interesting feature of these different systems. I mean, in a certain sense, they have their internal mechanisms for structure, but the question is, how can they export? In other words, how can they talk to other, systems? And so if there's something like a Dublin Core, then there's a lot of interoperability. There's a lot of ways to pull in the data. Now, so let's suppose you pull in data from some of these other places. What do you do with it?
Well, we have to do a lot with it because we need a very specific location. What we're trying to do is map all the items on a map.
Okay.
Specifically,
like an actual physical geographical type map.
Yeah, it's a Google map, and we want a pin to represent every item.
Okay.
So if it's a document that they're uploading and the document discusses a citrus grove, we might pin.
So I know where the citrus grove actually is. Yeah, got it. Okay.
And one thing that we did also is Dublin Core allows for what they call coverage, which is like a spatial coverage. So we wanted to be more specific than that. So we wrote a plugin to Omeka called Geocron, which basically puts a very specific location and a time associated with that location. So you can have multiple, like for example, if it's a veteran who went to war in Korea and then went to war in Vietnam. So during the oral history, he talks about these different places. So we can have multiple locations.
So then can you do different kind of layers of the map based on time, like a kind of a timeline sort of thing? So what's relevant to 1850? What's relevant to 1900? That kind of thing?
So what we do is we search with a timeline. So we have we have our search criteria on the left-hand side, and there's a timeline.
Okay.
So if you want to know what was happening, 1800 to 1820, you adjust your time range, range.
Okay.
And then the pins on the map, when you click search, the pins on the map will change to the items associated with the time.
Oh, great. Okay.
And so it's a Google Maps, so it's a standard interface. You can zoom out, zoom in.
Right, and Google Maps is very, very accommodating of different kinds of data coming in and out. I mean, they're set up for this kind of thing. I mean, that's another question that I'm always interested in. Why do you make the choices that you made? I mean, there are a number of mapping services. You went with Google Maps. Was it for that reason, for its ability to use data outside and kind of configure it in various ways?
Well, yeah, and it has just a nice API to be able
Okay.
to talk to it
Okay.
and to be able to put pins on the map
And for
show
those that don't know,
information.
what's an API?
It's an application programming interface, so
Right.
I can basically call functions
Right.
in the map. We actually tried to use Google Earth, but we found out that that was not a good idea because to use Google Earth, people have to have some part of Google Earth installed on their computer.
Exactly, right.
And so that's not good because then they go to the website and it stops
to
them if they don't
download
have.
something.
Yeah, so we
Sure.
decided just to go ahead and stick with maps.
So that's an interesting decision because everyone has a browser, and
Mm-hmm.
so you went with something that you know everyone has rather than requiring something
Yeah,
more.
and the other
Yeah.
interesting thing that happened was when the iPads came out,
Oh yeah,
they don't support Google Earth.
they don't play well. Yeah,
No.
I know.
So, but they do support maps. So,
Right.
so we wanted it
Right.
to work on tablets. So,
Okay. Do you have the ability for, just to, thinking about tablets and maybe even phones and stuff like that, smartphones, do you have the ability for people to upload stuff, on site? In other words, if they are, in front of a historical building, let's say, or they find something just like out wherever they happen to be, can they take a picture of it and upload it
Yeah.
right where they are, right from their phone?
Mhm.
Okay.
as long
that's-
as they have internet.
as long as they have internet, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so so it's more than just people looking in their what grandma handed down, but also what's right in front of them. Okay. Now Omeka is a way of structuring data, but it's also a kind of a way of presenting it as well, right? Do you have people doing the kind of online museum or online kind of displays, exhibits, that kind of thing?
In Omeka, they're called exhibits.
Exhibits, right?
Right. So we definitely have some student projects going on right now. Actually, one of the classes this semester,
Mm-hmm.
she has 11 students, I think, in her class, and
Mhm.
all 11 students went out and found a monument somewhere in the Orlando area
Mhm.
that they took a picture of, did research on,
Mhm.
and uploaded, contributed to
Mhm.
our database. And
Mhm.
now the class as a whole is making one exhibit for all those
Oh,
monuments
cool.
that they
Right.
did. So, and we've had internships where they will create an exhibit
Right.
too. And actually, probably in the spring, we're going to create exhibits that represent something called primary source sets for teachers. So these would
Okay.
be for K through 12
Mhm.
teachers, almost like little groups of primary sources that they could
Mhm.
use to tell a story to their classroom.
Oh, so just kind of a subset of what you have that you could kind of package up and give to them and say, here's a handy little
Right.
thing that you can use.
Yeah, to
okay.
teach a certain topic.
Right, that's interesting. So can you tell me a little bit about the various kind of projects that are under the Riches banner? I know you mentioned Veterans History, but I know there are a number of others as well. And are there particular kind of challenges that different projects present in the collection or the structuring of data? I know you had business history, Central Florida business history, and you had a number of others. How do these differ from each other?
Mhm. Well, I think they're all unique. The veterans history is a little bit interesting because we actually collect veterans history and give it straight to the library because it's a Library of Congress
Oh, okay,
program.
okay.
The library submits it to the Library of Congress and we import it from the library.
Oh, wow,
it's
so
kind of
it goes through you to them
Yeah.
and back again, wow.
So it's kind of interesting. Well, I mean, it's a student project. They submit it to
I see,
the
okay.
library and we get it back. There's other projects, for example, a lot of times we're using the contribution now, the contribution plugin for
Okay.
people's projects.
Okay,
So, because the projects can be done completely independently,
right,
and it's up to that project leader
Right.
to go ahead and contribute
Right.
the digital
Right.
items.
I mean, there's a gay and lesbian history one, is that not right?
Mhm,
There's,
right.
I think there are quite a number of different,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so those are all just kind of, leader-driven sorts of things. Like, hey, I
Exactly.
want to do this, and so somebody gets a bunch of people around them.
Mhm.
And So really, and do they have to, do they have to apply to the history department or to Riches to do that, or can they just do it?
I think they talked to Dr. Lester.
Dr. Lester, Connie Lester, who's
Talk to Dr. Lester.
who's the head of all of this. But and so the focus, obviously, given the name Riches, is on Central Florida.
Right. I was going to say, as long as it's Central Florida related and something's digitized, we can take it.
Right.
Pretty much.
Okay. All right. So that's interesting. So so people in the class, if you have a great idea, on something like that, there are people you can talk to about whether it could be done.
And it's nice for students because what I think is great about the whole deal is that once these projects were over in the past, once they were over,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe nobody thought about them anymore, and as soon as the exhibit came down from whatever museum or whatever. But this is nice because it stays forever on the database. You can always search it. The student themselves gets the citation. If for Dr. Lindsay's class where they're doing the monuments, they've contributed. So the creator in the Dublin Core, the creator is that student. And so when a student, they could put it on their resume. And
so are they listing these as publications, that kind of thing? Yeah, or are they more like creative, projects? Like
I think they can list it as a publication.
A publication, interesting. Okay. It does raise another question, which is always, one of the tough ones in digital humanities, which is sustainability of projects. I mean, technology changes, standards change, all of that sort of thing. How, you said these remain forever, but of course, nothing is forever. So how is this sustained over or how do you plan on sustaining this over time? Do you foresee changes in the structuring of data at any point, or what?
Well, it could be, yeah. Already, the program underneath has gone through huge changes over the last 2 years. It started out in 2010, they started working on it, and I came in at 2011, the end of 2011, and already, I've rewritten the entire program pretty much from scratch. Just because new technology comes out and you want to keep up with the current standards of how things are going. So
that's pretty labor intensive, isn't it? It's not just, you put it up there and then forget about it. You really do have to pay attention to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with as far as data formats. Like we have a lot of PDFs up there, but there's no guarantee that PDFs are going to continue to be the standard, because especially that's a proprietary product. It's an Adobe product.
Exactly. Yeah.
And right now we're using JPEGs. There's something new coming out with the new JPEGs.
I think I've heard about that. Yeah.
It's something new. So we might have to take everything we have and convert it to the new product, but that's just part of.
That's
that's just normal database stuff.
Right. That's an interesting feature of digital archiving, though, because in a material archive, the worst that could happen is that you've got a piece of paper that sits on a shelf and gathers dust for a century, but it's still there to be looked at, after that century's over. Whereas with this,
we don't have paper.
Exactly. Yeah. So it could easily just disappear unless somebody actually does something about it. So. So there, it seems to me what you're getting is really worldwide exposure, configurability, interoperability between other things, user friendliness, all of those sorts of things. The price you're paying is, having to pay attention to the sustainability of it. Yeah. So, and obviously not just your project, but any digital project. Yeah. Well, great. I think this really gives a nice kind of overview of what's going on with the project. So I appreciate your time.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks very much.